Meditation Masterclass 4. Why is breathing important? Breathing and metabolism. As we have discussed previously, that relaxation is an integral aspect of the meditation process. We will dedicate this and the next few discussions to breaths. In yoga, breath is a link between the body and the mind. Relaxing and controlling the breath, both the body and the mind can be relaxed and controlled. Besides this, breathing in specific patterns and ways is also good for immunity, mental health, physical stiffness, metabolic disorders, and other unparalleled and scientifically proven therapeutic benefits. So, why breathing matters? An average person breathes anywhere between 12 to 20 times a minute, which is around 23,000 breaths every day, which is more than 11,000 liters of air. And it is interesting to know that one can survive more than 3 weeks without food, maximum 3 days without hydration, but 3 minutes of breathlessness would lead to fatal brain damage. And from the above comparison, one could realize how important the breath is, yet we seldom consider it as a factor for promotion or demotion of health and longevity. We go to school and we do learn a little bit about proper diet, nutrition and hydration, and about maths and science and other useless stuff which a normal person is never going to use his entire lifespan, whereas we breathe in and out virtually every single second, and nobody teaches us how to breathe properly in a health promoting way. Improper breathing is the probable cause and also the possible solution for a variety of diseases such as chronic stress, migraines, back and shoulder pain, anxiety, PTSD, high blood pressure, even obesity, because obesity is not a disciplinary disorder, it is a metabolic disorder and hormonal disorder, but not many people treat it as a metabolic and hormonal disorder, and it's sad. And I would go as far as to suggest that it is also a key factor responsible for even severe metabolic disorders such as diabetes and indecorous blood pH. I shall attempt later to justify my wild claims and suggestions, but at this moment, let's focus on what it is that we refer to as breathing or respiration and why is it so important. We will first go into significant depth and understand breathing itself, and then we will jump to the physiological and anatomical aspects later. So, what is breathing? Breathing or respiration is defined as the movement of air into and out of the lungs to facilitate the movement of oxygen from the environment, the ambient air, to the cells within the tissues, and the transport of carbon dioxide in the opposite direction. So there are two aspects of breathing. First is the movement of air in and out of the lungs, and second is the admission of oxygen, expulsion of carbon dioxide. But do you even wonder for what does the body need so much of oxygen, and from where does it get so much carbon dioxide to expel? In other words, what is the process which is necessary for survival and which consumes oxygen and releases carbon dioxide? This process is of our core interest today and absolutely indispensable for our physical survival. And it is scientifically termed as biochemical respiration or cellular respiration. So, what is cellular respiration and what is metabolism? We are going into that. Metabolism and cellular breathing. We know that our body burns carbohydrates and fats to generate energy, but if we could know how it burns it, can it help us to burn more carbs and fats, or at least burn them more efficiently? Ever wondered if your tissues burns carbs and fats, why don't you see any flames or smoke coming out of your body? How does your body burn fats? If the body is composed of 70% water, and if the wood gets little moist, it is extremely difficult to burn. Our bodies do not burn the nutrients in the same way we burn wood, but it is called burning because any form of combustion is ultimately a chemical reaction, and the burning of wood is actually an exothermic chemical reaction, Exothermic, we mean the reaction which releases heat as the reaction proceeds. And this reaction is often represented by the simplified equation as follows: CxHy plus O2 gives CO2 plus H2O plus heat. Wood is primarily cellulose, also containing some impurities which don't burn very well, and leave a residue such as char, ash, smoke, and unburnable minerals in the wood such as calcium, potassium, etc. Similarly, our body turns the macronutrients into glucose and then consumes it by a process of chemical combustion inside the mitochondria of our cells, primarily known as metabolism. So, metabolism is a set of life-sustaining chemical transformation occurring within the cells of an organism. And there are three main purposes of metabolism: to convert the food into energy for running cellular processes, to convert food into building blocks for proteins, lipids, nucleic acids, which is RNA and DNA, and some carbs, to eliminate nitrogenous waste. Now, metabolic processes can be divided into two categories: catabolism and anabolism. Catabolism is the breaking down of organic matter, such as breaking up of glucose to form pyruvate by cellular respiration, and anabolism is the building up of components of cells such as proteins and nucleic acids. Usually, the breaking down releases the energy and building up consumes energy, and the metabolic system of an individual determines which substances are nutritious and which are poisonous, and how long he will survive, and how efficiently he will survive. The speed of metabolism, also known as metabolic rate or metabolism rate, governs how much food an organism will require and how efficiently and effectively will it use that available food. So, cellular respiration is the metabolic process by which an organism gets energy in the form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, by oxidizing nutrients and releasing waste products. The body doesn't consume fats and carbs, it uses glucose generated from this to form an intermediary fuel source known as ATP. So, what is ATP? ATP, adenosine triphosphate, is an intermediate source of energy in our cells used for muscular contraction, cellular division, transportation or locomotion of molecules across the cell membrane, synthesis of proteins, transmission of neural impulses, etc. And ATP is the precursor to RNA and DNA and is made up of one adenosine and three inorganic phosphate groups, which are designated as Pi for short. When the energy is required in the cell, at that instant, bond is broken in the ATP to form a molecule called adenosine diphosphate, and one Pi is released. So, adenosine triphosphate is transformed to adenosine diphosphate by hydrolysis of single bond. The ATP needs to be constantly renewed in order to have virtually an endless stock of it whenever needed, and this is done by cellular respiration. And mitochondria in the cell generates ATP using the chemical energy, which is glucose. Types of cellular respiration. Cellular respiration can be of two types: aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration requires oxygen to create ATP by consuming carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, and the end products of this process are carbon dioxide and water. And the energy generated or transferred is used to break bonds in ADP as the third phosphate group is added to form the ATP. And the energy in the ATP can be used for various processes as described previously. When the energy is consumed in the metabolic processes, ATP is converted back to ADP, adenosine diphosphate, or AMP, adenosine monophosphate. And the simplified equation for this process can be given as C6H12O6 plus 6O2 plus ADP plus Pi gives 6CO2 plus 6H2O plus ATP. Now, aerobic respiration is 15 times more efficient than anaerobic respiration, and it yields 29 to 30 molecules of ATP per molecule of glucose, compared to 2 molecules in case of anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration, when oxygen is unavailable or available insufficiently because of improper or insufficient breathing, such as while doing a rigorous exercise, the body switches to anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic means in absence of oxygen. When the labor is done without getting a sufficient amount of oxygen, our muscle cells, in order to produce ATP, start using anaerobic respiration. Here also the energy is generated is used to break bonds in ADP, and third phosphate group is added. But instead of carbon dioxide and water, uh, lactic acid is formed as the end product. Lactic acid is C3H6O3. And as discussed before, anaerobic respiration is not just less efficient, but it is also not sustainable for longer duration, and hence the body experiences fatigue and can no longer work. So when body is suffering from muscle fatigue, this indicates you have a oxygen debt. But as soon as you start breathing deeply and heavily, and you stop the activity and rest, and the heart keeps pounding, the oxygen requirement is restored, and in some time the body will get rid of the lactic acid built up. Deep breaths and sufficient oxygen are taken to change the lactic acid back to pyruvic acid, so that the aerobic respiration is resumed. Now, you may ask that all of this has to do with the physical activity, but I have a desk job. I spend most of my day sitting. So let's go to the effects of ATP on brain. And ATP is the primary source of cellular energy in the brain. The proper functioning of the brain depends mainly on two sources. They are oxygen and ATP, both of which are directly or indirectly dependent upon how we breathe. As we have already established for the body, ATP likewise enhances the delivery of nutrients and oxygen to the brain and stimulates the removal of the waste products. According to research done by University of Minnesota's Medical School, the ATP levels are linked to improvements in brain functioning. They noticed consistently high ATP levels when needed for efficient firing of neurons in the brain, as ATP is a primary fuel source for the brain cells, and two-thirds of total energy consumed by brain is used in the firing of neurons. And it also aids, and in a way it's almost indispensable for the brain's little understood maintenance activities. And without adequate levels of ATP, your brain has an energy drain and its function decreases. Below this certain level of ATP production, brain cells may begin to die, says Dr. Barry Shears, MD. As per Dr. Sarah Myhill, MD, the brain creates a million new connections every second. This means there is a huge potential for healing and repair, and it is simply a case of moving things in the right direction. But the brain has to have optimum energy supply to allow this process to happen, and ATP is the energy source it depends upon. The brain uses about 20% of body's total energy, and which is more than any other organ in the body, including the heart, and this means it also requires a large amount of ATP. Whenever attention is paid on performance of mental activity, the brain starts consuming ATP and starts converting it into ADP, and sometimes sleep becomes almost unavoidable for its retrieval. This explains how the drivers fall asleep while driving for longer durations on a straight long road, or students while reading for a longer time. And whether one is aware of these complexities or not, our body automatically takes care of these jobs and we stay healthy and fresh. However, in the last century, especially in the last couple of decades, our habits and our lifestyles, and the overall habitation has changed, and some of these changes have been so rapid that our bodies are unable to cope up with them. Improper breathing can be associated with many of the physical as well as mental disorders we are suffering from today. But as the nature offers symmetry, breathing can also be a potential treatment to many of such ailments, and we will discuss this in the next unit. Thank you. I wish you a great weekend, and see you next time. Namaste.
Please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the bell icon.